Hello, this is Katie and today I'm going to be showing you how to create these beautiful earrings. They could also be a pendant as well. You can size and scale it up as much as you'd like to, but today we're going to just be concentrating on making the other earring to match this one here. So what we're going to be using to create these lovely weave down the sides, and then we're going to channel set into the bottom of the little frame that we're going to make, and then we're going to finish off with a lovely jump ring and just a nice basic earring finding. You could make your own earring findings as well. So the things that we're going to need that other earring finding. We're going to need a jump ring, so you can use whatever's in your stash that works. I'm using a 4.5 inner diameter, and that's a 1mm gauge wire. We're going to need some microfaceted gemstones or seed beads if that's what you prefer to use, but they want to be between 2 and 3mm in size, not very big at all. We don't want this to become too chunky. It wants to stay nice and dainty. And we're going to need some base wire and obviously weaving wire too. So the weaving wire that we're going to be using is the 0.4mm. That is your 26 gauge in US terms. And the base wire we're going to use is the 0.9mm, which is your 19 gauge in US terms. You could also use your 1mm, which would be an 18 gauge as well. The tools that we're going to be using is we're going to be using some chain nose pliers. I've got really nice fine ones. It doesn't matter, you can just use standard ones. Some flush cutters, some round nose pliers, they're just basic standard ones. And we're going to need a mandrel of some sort just to create this nice looped effect. So you can use a variety of things you find around the house, or you can use a jewellery making tool. So I've got a ring mandrel here, so you could use that to make the size that you want to. I've actually used my lipstick to make this little shape here. It's just getting that nice rounded shape, or this is just a piece of pipe that was left over after some DIY, things like that. There's also things like lip glosses, that sort of thing. So, you know, anything around the house, don't be afraid to, you don't have to have an official tool as such. So I'm going to continue to use the same mandrel that I used before, and I know this is textured, but don't worry about it because it's going to lay on the outside, so it'll be fine. Initially we're going to need to cut our base wire, so we're going to take that 0.9mm wire and we're going to cut two lengths of it. So we've got an inner and an outer length. So the inner length is going to be the longer one, so that's going to be 11 centimeters. Let me just check that in inches. That actually converts as 4.33 inches according to my watch. So I'd go with about 4.5 inches. It doesn't really matter so much on the inner one. And then 10 centimeters for the outer one, which will be around about 4 centimeters. Not centimeters, inches, around about 4 inches. Right, so let's get on and make a start. Let me just move a few things out of the way. So initially we're going to take a look at this. We're going to take the shorter one, the one that's 10 centimeters in length, and that's your 0.9 or 1mm wire if you're using it. If you didn't catch the wire gauges, I tend to work in UK terms. There is a full conversion table down underneath the video. You can check that out at any time during the video or after. And also I did mention it right at the beginning, I don't tend to work in US terms. So taking your 10 centimeter length, we are going to take our mandrel, whatever you're using, and we're just going to wrap that around until they meet. So if they meet really nicely, that means you know that you've got the same length at each side. And we're just going to let them cross over. Once they've met nicely, just cross over a little bit, just because when we let it go, it'll come back to that center. So this is our outer frame. So this is the bit that comes all around the outside. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take those round nose pliers. So taking the round nose pliers, we want to come around about, these are a standard pair, So if you can see how far I've come down there, it's probably about a quarter of the way down maybe. And we're just going to hold it on the inside, just supporting it on the inside and basically pushing it around the mandrel. Then we're just going to open our pliers and reposition a little bit until we can bring it all the way around so it actually meets the wire again. There's a tiny gap, just pop your pliers back in, give that a little bit of a push further down. And we do the same on the outside, so we're making a loop onto the outside, making sure we position our pliers again in the same place that we did. If you want to make a little mark on your pliers, you can do. And then we're just going to bring that all the way down, so we'll get 2 matching loops, a little loop on each side. Now if you have them, I know I didn't mention them right at the beginning, but if you have them, you can just give them a little squish with your nylon jaw pliers. If you haven't got them, it's just to make sure that everything's balanced and nice. You can just give those a little gentle tap with your chain nose pliers. Now if you wanted to at this stage, you could hammer this and make this a little bit more work hardened, but it's not needed because we will be working with 2 wires together, so it will be nice and strengthened in any case. So we're just going to pop that to one side for a second, and we're going to take that longer length, that 11 centimetre length. We're going to go back to the same mandrel and do the same thing again. So bring it around your mandrel. Make sure your points come together really nicely. And this time we don't mind if it kind of crosses over that little bit more. Because we want this to sit on the inside, if we just laid it on top now, it's the same size. So we don't want that. We want to create this lovely channel here. So just if we just take hold of each end and just pull it together a little bit, push it together a little bit, you just really very slightly. And we're just going to start bringing this so that it's going to sit more on the inside. So I can see there, if I pop these together, can see it's kind of touching at the sides, so I want to just bring that together a little bit. We can open it up at the top a little bit. We're just going to keep moving this, making little adjustments until we're happy with where everything's sitting. No big moves. So we want everything to sit really nicely in that gap. So we want it to sit nicely in there, just like that. So we've got that nice open part at the bottom. So if you pop that against there, open part at the bottom, and then that cross is actually sitting in between those 2 loops that we made. Let me just zoom in on that a little bit. There we go. So we've got my frame is sitting inside my original frame. I've got a nice open section at the bottom, and that little cross is sitting. Now obviously you're going to be making 2 earrings at once, so you're going to be doing this in tandem. So you'll make the outer frame and then you'll be doing this, and you're going to make sure they're actually matching up. So once you've got that and you're happy with it, making sure you don't move anything, just move these out of the way. So making sure you don't move anything on this frame. We're just going to go in where that cross is. So pop my pliers underneath that. I'm just supporting everything and just making a little kink and smoothing that out. Turning that over, so I'm working on the wire that's underneath because it's a little bit easier. So, and then I'm just going to straighten that out a bit. And then we're going to offer it back up to our frame. Don't worry if these have become unlevel at the top. And I'm still happy with how that is sitting. So now I'm going to start. I'm ready to start my wire wrapping. We'll deal with these wires at the very end, these ones here. Don't worry if these particular ones have become slightly uneven, because we'll be taking a little bit off those as well. We need to take our weaving wire. I've got about 50 centimetres here of my 0.4mm wire. That's your 26 gauge, I believe. I've popped some gemstones on, so I've just threaded those on. Aim for having around about 10 or 11 on there. To be honest, I think I only use 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 on these. And it will depend on the way that you've made your frame, how many you're going to fit in. You're definitely not going to get more than 11 in there. So, and then at one end of your wire, so that those gemstones don't fall off, I'm just going to pop my round nose pliers in and just make a little kind of coil. So I'm going to go around a few times just so that I've got that little coil on the end, and my gemstones won't fall off. So picking up the outer frame one, so the one with the loops, just move some tools out to one side a second. So wire does like to grab other wire, and we're going to be working, so I'm right-handed, so I'm going to be working on this side that's closest to me. I'm going to bring my wire up through the loop and bend it over, and then we just need to leave a little tail, this little tail here, and we're going to pop a couple of wraps on here. Now the beauty of this is that we have got this open space, so we can utilize that open space to bring our wire around. So we're going to go once and twice. We've got that little tail, so it'll look like there's 3. We're just going to go around 2 times. Now push it right up to that loop, and then we're going to bring that over so we're ready to add our inner frame. Now this is going to move around a little bit, but the principle is that you're going to try and keep those little notches that you made in between the loops, and we're going to try and retain this nice gap at the bottom. So it's not something that we rush, it's something that we take nice and slowly and just build it up as we go. So this time, can you see that wire is now coming over these 2 wires? We're going to go over 2 wires. So it's going to feel a little bit fiddly at this point. We don't want to pull anything too tight. We just want it to fit around the wires. So I've gone over 2 wires and back down the back, over again, then I'll loop it through. So I'm telling the wire where I want it to go first, and then I'm going to bring it back down the back again. So now we've got 2 wraps on 1 wire, 2 wraps over 2 wires. Now this time we want to just wrap the outer wire again, and we're going to utilize this gap. So over, utilize that little gap, so bring it through that gap and around. That's probably going to look a little bit confusing on camera, so just really take your time to watch this. So I'm bringing it over the top first, then I'm going through that gap and around. I'm going to push everything together. This will still slide around a little bit. Just make sure that with every sort of couple of wraps that you do, you're just assessing it. If you feel like it's slipping a little bit, you can just take your pliers, pull it towards you a little bit. It's tiny little movements, but we're just going to work until we get to this part where it's starting to splay out a little bit. So I'll just do a little bit more. So we're going 2 wraps over 2. 1, 2. 2 wraps over 2 wires. We're totally ignoring the opposite side. 2 wraps over 2 wires. Push them together. If they are a little bit splayed apart, don't be afraid to just bob in with your pliers and just bring those together. And we're going to go over. So especially the reason I'm coming over and then going through is that I'm telling the wire where I want it to go before I put it there. If I just go over like this, can you see it's not kind of going in the right direction? Let's just bring that back again. So I'm going to tell the wire where I want it to go. I want it to go over, straight over the wire. Now I'm going to bring it through, and now I can just push that together and it'll sit a lot nicer. So we're doing the 2 and 2 wraps. So 2 wraps over 1 wire, 2 wraps over 2 wires. I'm going to bring that all the way down to about this point, so that my next one will be 2 wraps over 1 wire, which would be the outer wire. So I'll come back and join you there. At this point, this wire is starting to open up a bit. It's not wide enough to add a gemstone yet, but what we need to do is, once we've got these 2 wraps over 1 wire on the outside, we want to wrap it over but not close in that gap. So we're going to come all the way over and just place it round, but can you see I've not pulled that together, so it's not closing in that gap. Pulling that over, pushing it, I'm more placing it round than pulling everything. So that one is slightly wider than the one before it, and then I'm back to the outer wire. So I can do my 2 wraps on this one, and then again I'm just coming over. And can you see now more on this next one? We've got a nice gap in our wire. So I'm not pulling that wire together. we're retaining that nice gap that we've got at the middle here. So, and then down to 2 wraps over the bottom wire. Now, if you think this is coming a little bit too tight in there, we can just make sure that any adjustments are made. Make sure I'm retaining that shape. That's why we haven't cut these 2 top wires yet, so we can pull it and see what happens. If things move, if things slip, we've got that adjustment. So now here, looking at that, I'm thinking I could pop a gemstone in there. Just before those gemstones start, I have got 2 wraps on the outer, and then I can drop my first gemstone down, let that lay there, so it'll sit in that nice little gap there, and then I'm bringing that all the way over like so. So I've just sat it in that gap, and I'm going to wrap the inner frame. So I'm going to come in between that gap again like we were before, but this time I'm wrapping 1 wrap on that inner frame all the way around. Okay, so you've got, it's going to look like there's 2 wraps because you've got one that's coming over that's attached to the gemstone, and then a single wrap. Now you're going to come down, straight down the back, so flip it over, straight down the back, and then I'm going to wrap that outer frame 1 time, like so. Now we've got that 1 wrap on the outer frame, we're going to drop another gemstone down. So however many gemstones you add on your first earring is the same amount you'll add on your second earring. So all the time assessing and checking that we've still got this nice gap. We don't want to pull anything together too much. So laying your gemstone across, coming down in between, laying it down the back just so that you can see that everything's set in place nicely. Now we want to be coming up in between this gap, and we can do that by just utilising that open space. Hold over your gemstones. It probably hurt your fingers a little bit if it's something you've not done before, but it just does kind of set them and keep them in place like so. So that is that back down the centre. That is that single wrap after. So you can see there I've added my second gemstone, then a single wrap on the inner frame. Now I'm going to come in between and do that single wrap on the outer frame. Now I'm going to drop this down, just one at a time, lay that over the front again, bringing that over, making sure I'm happy with how they're set in that little gap. They will sit slightly forwards in the gap, you can see there. They're not going to sit entirely in the inside because you've got the wire going through it. And then I'm just going to make sure I wrap that inner frame once after the gemstone. So it's 1 single wrap after you've added the gemstone. Wire goes straight down the back. 1 single wrap on the outer frame before you add the gemstone. Let your next gemstone drop down. Lay that across the front and through the middle, and then putting my thumb over it. But by putting my thumb over it, I'm kind of just setting that in place. Okay, now I'm going to bring my wire through that little gap and a single wrap after the gemstone. So you're going to continue adding these. So if you're going to do one at a time, obviously, but make sure that wherever you start on the second one, you start in the same place that you started on the first one, and hopefully you will end up with the same amount of gemstones on each side. So I'll meet you back when I've added my last gemstone. So I've got down to that place where I've added my last gemstone. I'm happy that it's sitting nice and evenly. I've got the same amount of gemstones that I have in my opposite piece. And thinking back to where we started adding our gemstones, we've got 2 wraps on the outer. So we're going to wrap the outer frame twice, once and twice, and then we're going to go straight back into that 2 and 2 weave. So remembering that just here we don't want to pull that frame too close together. We want it to sit like it did at the opposite side. So really nicely sort of leaving that slight gap, so not pulling anything too tight, especially when we're doing the 2 wraps over 2 wires. So just more placing the wire nice and neatly. No need to pull anything, just getting that wire wrapped around nicely and then going, so maybe a slightly tighter wrap on the outer wire. And you're just going to continue that 2 and 2 wrap until you get right to the top just here. Okay, so I have continued wrapping all the way to the top, and I finished just before that original loop that we made with 2 single wraps on the outside. I've got a couple of gemstones left on there, but we don't need to worry about that. Now what I want to do is snip off any tail wires now. So no, I don't snip off any tail wires. You can snip the tail wire off from the opposite side, not the one with the gemstone still attached. Gosh, that would have been a catastrophe, because we want to add, make sure you nibble that very end in. We want to add that little gemstone at the top there, don't we? So what we want to do is come around. So I've just come through to the back. You see, I've just taken my wire to the back, so I've come through this gap here. Now what I want to do is, don't want to drop my gemstone down yet. I want to come across the back and over those 2 central wires. So I've come over, so I've just kind of binding these 2 central ones together. And now my wire's back at the front of my piece again. I can let that gemstone drop down. Now it's at the front and my wire's in position, and I can go around and through that gap. Okay, so we just got our wire into the nice position, ready to add that gemstone. Now I can just take my wire, and I'm going to go with the wire that's closest to me, this one here, and I'm just going to pop a couple of good neat wraps just on there, just to finish things off. So I've got that 2 wraps just after I've added that gemstone there. Now I'm just going to go right to the back again, and I'm going to snip off my wire nice and flush cut as close as possible to my work. Snip off that little bit of wire, and then I could just give that a little nip in with my pliers, making sure there's nothing there that could catch on skin or hair. And now I'm left with an almost finished earring. We're getting there now. So what I want you to do is hold on to that gemstone that you just added at the top, support everything, and just push those little prongs a little bit forwards. I'll hold it that way, you can see how much I've gone there with that. So it's not a lot. Now we want to make these little loops here. Now whatever length you make these, you need to make it the same for both of your earrings. I usually go with around about 1 centimetre. So 1 centimetre from where I bent them to where my pliers are. So I'm going to snip that, and then I can just take my round nose pliers. Don't worry that they're splayed out a little bit. They're still splayed out on here. It adds an extra sort of dimension to them. And I'm going to roll them back. So you can see they're pointing towards the front, so where the gemstones are at the moment. And I'm going to roll them back with my round nose pliers. So I want to come around about the same size as that loop that we made at the same point on your pliers. And I'm just going to roll them back. Okay, so I've made 1 loop, and then I'm going to make the opposite loop. So grabbing them onto your pliers, making sure you can't actually feel them at this side. That'll mean you're right at the very tip. So bringing those all the way around. It might get a little bit fiddly as they come together, but you can always use this as the tip of your pliers just to encourage them to sit in the right place. I'll take to your chain nose pliers now, so I can just take a little bit of time, just making sure we've got nice fully closed loops and they're all sitting very nicely together, like so. So now we're going to take our jump ring. Now if you have got 2 pairs of chain nose pliers, that is ideal, because what you want to do is hold one side with a jump ring Let's just get this to focus nicely. So you want to hold it straight across almost the entire jump ring. And can you see where that cut is? It's a nice sort of cut jump ring. And then I can take my opposite pair of pliers and open it up like so. Now I can just hold on to that jump ring. I can pop it through both of those loops, and then I can just make sure my ear wire is in the right direction, and I can pop that on there. And then again, I'm going to go back and hold that entire side of my jump ring, and then with my opposite hand, I'm just going to wiggle that into position so that I know it is a fully closed jump ring and nothing's going to get through that little gap. So there we go. These are my little earrings. I think they're perfect Valentine's, Mother's Day. Really, really pretty. You could also make those into a pendant, absolutely. Apologies for the Christmas nails. I've just realised I really do need to change those. So thank you so much for watching. I will be back again very, very soon. I've got lots and lots planned this year. The end of the year, just in case you were wondering, I had a problem with my arm and I couldn't work for a couple of months. So yeah, I wasn't kind of as active as I would normally be, but I'm looking forward to bringing you lots and lots this year. So I hope you enjoy this design. I hope you make it maybe Valentine's, maybe Mother's Day, make the matching pendant too. And I hope you get a lot from this tutorial. Don't forget to like the video, don't forget to subscribe, and then you won't miss a thing. I'll see you again really, really soon.